Our digital desk. We're going to take you into court there. The man you see in the orange is Bernard Murphy. He is a part of a couple who went in and shot a man in his Seven Hills home last August of 2022. I'm going to show you his wife, who was in on this crime. They went into the home. They went into the home of Maurice Petrak, who was 54 years old, and both that man there and his wife have pleaded guilty. Bernard Murphy today has pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter, and he's going to be sentenced. His wife, Janae Murphy, she's going to be sentenced later this month. She pleaded guilty to the charge of having weapons under disability. But again, the pair went into that Seven Hills home and killed 54-year-old Maurice Petrak. And today is the sentencing for that man, Bernard Murphy. Let's take you live into the courtroom. All right.
You may be seated then.
We are on the record in the state of Ohio versus Bernard Murphy. This is case 673-157. On a previous date, defendant withdrew his former entered plea of not guilty and entered a plea to an amended indictment. He entered a plea to involuntary manslaughter in violation of 2903.04A, a felony of the first degree with a 3-year firearm specification. There is an agreed recommended sentence before the court of 14 years, and we continue the sentencing today to comply with victim impact, and the state is prepared to go forward. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
And counsel, are you prepared to go forward?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Anything the state would like to put on the record prior to imposition of sentence?
Briefly, Your Honor, today on behalf of the family of Maurice Petrak, I believe there are 3 members of his family and friends who wish to address the court. And with the court's permission, I would invite them as well. But, you know, just the state's position, we are asking this court to go along with the agreed recommended sentence of 14 years, the maximum on the involuntary, the 3-year spec for this defendant. This was an incident that occurred August 1st, 2022 in Seven Hills, Ohio, when the defendant, along with his then wife, arrived at the residence of Mr. Petrak to settle some sort of a drug dispute over counterfeit money. That incident escalated, Your Honor, to the point where the defendant, with a firearm, pointed and shot and killed Mr. Petrak, and then left the scene and hid the firearm. You know, so we're asking this court to take those actions into account when it imposes the maximum on it.
All right, thank you. I'll hear from whomever you'd like. I'd ask whoever is addressing the court to keep their comments directed to the court and not at Mr. Murphy. If anybody wants to stand up, they can go over to the podium.
Thank you. First, Maurice Petrak Sr.
Good afternoon, sir. If you would, please state your name, spell your last name for the record.
My name is Maurice Petrak. The last name is spelled P-E-T-R-A-K.
What would you like the court to know, sir?
Well, this is clearly out of my hands, but it's about my son. My son was firstborn on Mother's Day, firstborn in the family on Mother's Day, 1968. And beginning then, he was, of course, the exalted. And when I say exalted, I'm talking about the way he was thought of by his parents, his grandparents, all his siblings, all of his cousins, all of the people in the family, he was an important part of. Now, I'd like to shortcut this. I'd like you to see it, Your Honor, but I'm disposed to try and defend. You know, he was, by name, he was Maurice Jr. To some, he was Maury Jr. To some, he was Maury, or he was Mo to many things and many people. To his friends, he was Mo. To his uncles and his aunts, it was Little Mo. And you have to know that he was 6'5" and 450 pounds. To his sons, Brian and James, he was Dad. To his nieces, nephews, his cousins, to his nieces and nephews, he was Uncle Maury. The broadcast of cousins goes to the number of maybe 50. He was a college graduate. He graduated from John Carroll University after being a seminarian for 3.5 years. He invested his time in his relationship with God. Now, how does it happen that he gets murdered in his driveway after having pursued that relationship with God? It happened because drugs got a hold of him. And the whole dispute, whether we talk about it or not, was the fact that people are crippled by the presence of narcotics. That's not the case here, though, except that that's how they all were brought together. He was the kind of guy who gave back. He worked for the veterans of the Volunteers of America in the Veterans Relocation Program, working with recovering addicts and homeless veterans. He was an exceptional human being in that he was the one who took his grandparents' generation to their grave in every way, sitting beside his grandfather on his deathbed for a period of time. I don't even know. His other grandfather, he managed to make his way to Las Vegas and comfort my grandmother during my father's final days. He was that type of human being. He was looked to be that go-to guy in the palliative care period of people's lives. He had value. He had worth. He spent his life trying to make things better for other people. When he went off the rails, even though he had gone off the rails and was at the mercy of these narcotics, we still had hope. We still had hope that he'd get out of it, that he'd be better. When the detectives came to see us on the day he was killed, we fully expected them to tell us that he overdosed. He didn't die by gun violence. All those things have come and gone. There's 35 days, maybe 34 days until it's an anniversary. He died on the 1st of August of last year. We're all in great pain over this. And I'm at a loss. We'll always have him in our memory, always have him in our hearts. But for those of us who knew him, we don't understand what happened. And Your Honor, thank you for taking the time. I'd like to know more about the incident itself. We're in the dark completely. But I guess it's on benefit to everyone here, everyone involved, that this is wrapping up without further delay. I thank everyone here for being here, and I'm grateful for you listening to what I had to say.
Thank you, sir.
Miranda Prego, Your Honor.
Good afternoon again. If you could just state your name and spell your last name for the record, please.
Miranda Crago, Crago.
Okay, go ahead.
My name is Miranda Crago, and I am the niece of Maurice Petrak Jr. He was a huge pivotal member in my life, my father figure. I remember all the car rides where we'd sing together as he had the voice of an angel. He was always the person who'd give the shirt off his back, and he was proud of the work he did for the veterans. I always went to him for advice, as he was my person. He wasn't perfect, but he was very close to it in my eyes. He will never see me go back to school for nursing. He won't get to see his great niece, my daughter, and all of the amazing things she will do. I now have to live longer without him than I got to with him, and it breaks my heart daily. I can no longer watch crime shows because it triggers me, wondering what his last minutes were like. August 1st, 2022 will forever be one of the hardest days. Now I have a 3-inch urn to talk to and remember him by. I slowly have forgiven Bernard, but I can't forgive it all right now. I pray daily for understanding, because I know Uncle Mo would not want me to be angry or sad and to forgive. I can no longer have Christmas, birthdays, no Father's Day to give him cards to tell him how much he means to me. I no longer have my Uncle Mo. His funeral had more people than I have ever seen, as he was a friend to many. It's sad to think that my grandma and grandpa outlived their son. My mother and aunt lost their brother, although he was a brother to everyone he met. He was my daughter's great uncle, and she, in her young life, should have never had to attend his wake. I never thought I'd lose my dad. The constant nightmares and anxiety affect me every single day, and I'm not sure it'll ever go away. Uncle Mo, I always loved you no matter what, and I always will. I really hope heaven is all that you imagined and more. Thank you.
One more, Your Honor. Joe Letnick.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Joseph Blatnick, Blatnik. In the early morning hours of August 1st, 2022, the actions of Bernard Murphy ended the life of Maury Petrak Jr. It changed the lives of his family and friends forever. Addiction is a cruel disease that knows no bounds. It makes people do things that are not of their character, and loved ones can be transformed into people that we don't recognize. What remains is the true essence of the person hidden under the mess of addiction. And Maury was bigger than life, both literally and figuratively. And his love for God, his family, friends, and strangers was even bigger. He would put others before himself, no matter the time of day. And he was a man of peace and was not a man of violence. He was the peacemaker. He used his stature alone to settle disputes without violence. He would often be the man that would try to help resolve conflict. With his large stature and big heart, trying to resolve a conflict ended his life. The irony in all this, and I say big heart, he was 450 pounds at one time, and his heart was as big as his body. As much love as he had for everybody, including complete strangers. And the irony was one fatal shot through that big heart that killed him. Bernard Murphy's actions created the most excruciating pain in the lives of his parents, his family, and his friends. Maury was a son, a brother. Although we did not come from the same mother, he was my brother. I've known him since I was 17 years old. Father, uncle, and friend. We all have a void in our lives that cannot be replaced, but hopefully in time will heal. His loss has been felt at gatherings, with family and friends, has been evident. The first are the hardest. The first holidays, birthdays, anniversaries, spontaneous hangouts, late night phone calls of deep conversation of faith, or whatever topic was at hand. He has been missed. He was also a godfather. He was a godfather to my youngest son, who's here today. And all those titles that I just mentioned, he relished in the honor of each one of those titles. Family and faith were of the utmost importance to him. The pain of this loss comes in waves, sometimes out of nowhere. It'll take time for that pain to lessen. Bernard Murphy demonstrated his disregard for the law through his illicit actions and years of drug use, illegal possession of firearms, and his disposition for violence and murder. No one should be allowed to keep committing crimes like this and get away with it. I know there is a plea agreement of lesser charges or a charge to spare the loved ones and all of us the pain of a trial, but I ask the court to exercise its power to render the maximum sentence in the charges. Bernard Murphy needs to spend a lifetime in prison and contemplate his actions in taking the life of Maury Petrak Jr. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Anything else from the state?
No, Your Honor.
Counsel's on behalf of your client.
Please the court. Mr. Murphy sits here today, or stands here now. He's 45 years old. He was married at the time of this offense. He had a 11-year-old daughter. As this court is aware, there's always many more victims in these cases, collateral damage, whatever you want to describe it as. So, one thing in this case that I know Mr. Petrak Sr. hit on is drugs. As this court's aware, anytime you have drugs involved and guns involved, there's bad outcomes. And this night was no different. Mr. Murphy, by entering this plea, he's taken full responsibilities for his actions that night. He's not blaming his addiction for what happened that night. Obviously, put him in the location And that's one of the, I believe, what all these people involved shared in common. They were drug addicts, they sold to each other, they used with each other, they partied with each other. And unfortunately, this night, the party ended. I know Mr. Murphy would take it all back if he could. He's going to address the court and maybe shed some light on the facts of this case that the family doesn't know about. Mr. Murphy didn't go there with the intentions to shoot anybody, to kill anybody that night. He did go there high on narcotics, and he went there with a firearm. That's not disputed. And that's why we're all here today. And that's why Mo is not here. Up until we were entered into this plea last week or 2 weeks ago, my client had every intention of taking this case to trial and arguing self-defense. But as the court is aware, in these types of cases, people, they have to make a decision that impacts their life. And at the end, Mr. Murphy decided to take the sentence that was offered by the state that was negotiated, and due in part to the family's consideration to agree to that. And I think that speaks a lot of his change in character before the court today. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, counsel.
Nothing further. I would just ask that the court would put on the record our objection to Reagan Tokes.
I'll note that for the record.
And Mr. Murphy would like to speak.
Mr. Murphy, you can stay seated, Mr. Murphy. If you'd like to address the court, you may. You're not required to.
Sure. Your Honor, I'm sorry. Sorry to the family, to his friends. Mo was a good guy. Drugs had a big part of this. I take responsibility for my actions, but in the same breath, Your Honor, Brandon Evans, there should be a lot of guilt laid at his feet because by pointing gun on me. First, Mo was an unfortunate circumstance that happened. Everything he said about him is true. He's a good guy. It was Brandon Evans that put this together. I'm sorry. I never meant that man to kill. There was no premeditation. There was no malice intent. And again, I'm sorry to the family. I called him Mo because he wasn't a friend. It was a bad situation. Drugs. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Everybody, I'm sorry. But I was thrown into a situation and I acted, and I'm sorry. That's all, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. I don't think you were thrown into any situation. You're not thrown into a situation when you are bringing drugs and firearms to the party. Those are results that are logically going to follow. This isn't an accident. Firearms and drugs, I'm not sure when any of those combinations would be healthy outcomes. And Mr. Petrick, and to the rest of the family, I'm very sorry for your loss. And I can't imagine what you're going through. We see it here all the time. And Mr. Petrick, you were 100% correct that narcotics are crippling our society. And we see it here every day, and I don't know what the solution is. But drugs don't discriminate, and they have literally taken some of the best folks we have and turned them into something that we don't recognize. I wish I would have had the opportunity to meet this fella, because he sounds like he was a heck of a party and just a good guy to everybody. And again, how we went from the seminary to this, I don't know. And Mr. Murphy, I do give you some credit for taking responsibility. Again, the plea demonstrates this wasn't your intent, but again, why we're out there with drugs and firearms, and you're not a child, you're not 19 years old. You are well old enough to know and have been given opportunities before to try and clean yourself up. So it's just a tragedy. It's a ripple effect, as counsel indicated, to all the families. Absolutely no winners here. Everyone's a loser. There has been a negotiated plea recommendation to the court. So, Mr. Blatnick, you indicated about give him the maximum time. He will get the maximum time under the plea agreement. And I'm confident my words here will fall short to both families. Again, everybody's has a loss. There are no winners. But I hope today does give you some closure. You can move on. And as Miranda indicated, I think that's what he would have wanted. His memory to go on positively and get this behind you. And to you, sir, I hope that you take this opportunity to get yourself clean, educate some others in the community about the risks of drug addiction, firearms, and turn yourself around. If you were really a friend to him, I think that's the best you could do back. That being said, the court has formulated its decision based upon the overriding principles and purposes of felony sentencing, which are to protect the public from future crime by the defendant or others, and to punish the offender using the minimum sanctions that the court determines accomplishes those purposes without imposing an unnecessary burden on state or local government resources. To achieve these purposes, the court has considered the need for incapacitation, deterrence, rehabilitation, and providing for restitution. The court has considered the relevant sentencing guidelines provided in 29-29-11, 29-29-12, 29-29-13, as well as 29-29-19. Consistent with the plea agreement, as to the felony of the first degree, that'll be an 11-year sentence at the Lorraine Correctional Institution. There's also the 3-year firearm specification. That 3-year firearm specification must run prior to and consecutive with the underlying 11-year sentence for a total of 14 years. Sir, I'll remind you, upon your release from the institution, you do face a mandatory minimum of 2 years, up to a maximum of 5 years of what is called post-release control. That means that the Adult Parole Authority, and not this court, will supervise you. They will give you terms and conditions you must follow. Should you fail to meet the terms and conditions of the Adult Parole Authority, then they can modify and or extend your supervision and make it more restrictive. Incarcerate you for up to 1/2 the original sentence imposed by this court. If you fail to appear for them, they can charge you with a new offense called escape, another felony, where you face additional prison time. And if you commit new crimes while on post-release control, you can face the maximum penalty under the law for new crimes committed. Sir, based on your plea, you are also subject to what is known as the Reagan-Tokes Law. I will note your lawyer's objection. What that means, sir, is, as we talked about at the time of the plea, you will receive a definite sentence and also an indefinite sentence. Based on your behavior at the institution, prison system, and not this court, can again give you up to 1/2 of the original sentence here, and I must read you the following. That there is a rebuttable presumption that the defendant shall be released from service of the sentence at the expiration of their minimum term or presumptive early release date, whichever is earlier. That the DRC may rebut presumption if at a hearing held under 2967.271, DRC makes specified determinations regarding the offender's conduct while confined, the offender's threat to society, the offender's restrictive housing, if any, while confined, and the offender's security classification. That if, as described in Division 2, DRC at the hearing makes a specified determination and rebuts the presumption, they may maintain the offender's incarceration after the expiration of that minimum term or after the presumptive earned early release date for the length of time DRC determines to be reasonable, subject to the limitations specified in Section 2967.271. That the Department may make the specified determination and maintain the offender's incarceration under the provisions described in Division B, 2, C1, and Division 2 of this section more than one time, subject to the limitations specified in Section 2967.271, that if the offender has not been released prior to the expiration of the offender's maximum prison term imposed as part of the sentence, the offender must be released upon the expiration of that term. What that means, sir, is you will receive 2 sentences today. You will receive a definite sentence of 11 years on the underlying felony of the first degree. 50% of that, again, would be an additional 5.5 years. With the 3-year gun specifications, you're looking at 14 years, up to a maximum of 19.5 years in prison. Do you understand that, sir?
Yes, sir.
I'm not going to impose any other fines, fees, or costs. You've previously been declared indigent and remain so. You will be given credit for 322 days of jail time credit. And is there anything else we need to do on the record on behalf of the state?
No, Your Honor.
Is there anything else, counsel?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
All right, you are remanded to the custody of the sheriff, transport to Lorraine Correctional Institution. Good luck to you, sir. And again, I'm very sorry for all of your losses in the courtroom here today. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dan DeRose with 19 News. As we see Bernard Murphy being led away from court here, receiving a 14-year sentence. A 45-year-old man that clearly drugs have taken a toll on his body and his life. And as we hear, that was one of the major causes and reasons behind this situation that took the life of 54-year-old Maurice Petrak. I'm not sure if you could hear Bernard during his apology, Bernard Murphy, but he claims that it was Mo, as his family called him, his family and friends, that Mo pulled a gun first, and that he simply shot at Mo after he pulled a gun. That would give you an indication as to why he was allowed to plead guilty to involuntary manslaughter, instead of this being some sort of, whether this was a robbery for drugs and he pulled the gun and shot Maurice Petrak. It appears that the prosecutors knew that that would be a tough case to get a conviction for if there was proof that Maurice Petrak had his own gun, and a jury would have to decide whether it was self-defense. But in this case, by taking responsibility, saying he's pleading guilty to involuntary manslaughter, he does get that 14 years. Now, what we heard is now ex-wife. This woman is Jenna Murphy. She was there that day as well. She has already pleaded guilty to the charge of having weapons while under rehabilitation. So she will be sentenced later this month for her role in that night, whether it was a purchase for drugs or selling drugs. We heard that's what this was, back and forth, that they purchased drugs, sold drugs to each other, used drugs with each other at times. And as the judge said, that's never a good combination. The judge agreed with the father of Petrak, saying that narcotics are crippling this country, and the judge sees it every day, and he just doesn't know what to do about it. A very sober message sent from the judge. If we have any other breaking news, we're going to bring it to you here on our digital platforms. If not, we will see you when we start 3.5 hours of news on Cleveland 19. Coming up at 3 o'clock. Until then, I'm Dan DeRose with 19 News Now. Have a good afternoon.
19 News is everywhere. Download our CTV apps and follow us on social media at